Hello, everyone. I am Lisa Rivera, the president of the Arizona Native Plant Society Phoenix chapter, and this presentation is native landscaping plants and where to find them. All right, so first of all, why a focus on native plants? Well, first of all, they are both in general, they are both low maintenance and low water use. This is because since they're local to our area, they have evolved to survive in our local climate. Also, native plants provide vital resources to our local wildlife, such as birds and pollinators. These resources include food, water, cover, shelter, and nesting spaces. Also, some animal species are called specialists, which means they require a specific type of plant in order to survive. One great example of that is if you know about monarchs and milkweed. Monarch caterpillars, the only plant that they can consume to live is milkweed. That is why it's so important that we've got milkweed in our landscapes. Also, by using native plants, we help to maintain the natural food web in our local area. And then lastly, I'm sure we've all heard about habitat loss, habitat destruction for various reasons. By kind of taking our own space that we have and trying to incorporate native plants, we can in the process restore what were previously patches of native habitat. Also, just in general, native plants are beautiful. So why wouldn't you want to incorporate those into your landscape? So kind of a basis for where I'm coming from in the kind of what led me to where I'm at today and the inspiration for a presentation I gave a few years ago, similar to this, was when I was a graduate student. I became interested in native plants and using them in my landscape at home. Was trying to learn about them, but was finding that I was having difficulty actually finding them at nurseries. And was just curious if that was just me. Was I not looking in the right places? Was I not looking, correctly? So I made it kind of a mission and a research project of mine to kind of just delve into that and see what was going on. So I went to all of the various retail nurseries in the Phoenix metro area. This was back in 2018. That's what this map is showing, where they're located. I did go to at least one Walmart, Lowe's, and Home Depot. However, I didn't include all of those Walmart's, Home Depot's, and Lowe's on the map. Otherwise, the map would be really busy and kind of get a little skewed. So in general, this is where you'll find kind of the major nurseries in our area. Again, based on 2018, there could be some differences since then. And then from that, I was evaluating a list of plants that I had come up with, native plants that I was seeing, do they have these in stock, or are they listed on their website as something that they generally carry? And from that, I saw that some nurseries, kind of did have a good variety. The top of the list was, at that time, Treeland Nurseries had 34 of the species that I was looking for. A close second was Richard's Garden Center, which had 32. Some other top ones were Desert Foothills Garden Nursery, Elgin Nursery and Tree Farm, North Scottsdale Nursery and Cactus, and Diggett Gardens and Linden Tree Nursery. Also Summer Winds. And then down at the bottom, really not a surprise, was the Home Depot, Lowe's, and Walmart. They're really kind of geared towards mass market, kind of, have a lot of the same inventory that they would have locally that they would maybe in California or in maybe even Ohio, and those aren't necessarily the plants that are the best fit for here. And then a lot in the middle. So what did I learn from this? Really that I wouldn't say, and I still believe this, unfortunately, that none of the nurseries in the Phoenix area I would call a specialist in native plants. I also don't think any of them would call themselves a specialist in native plants. However, that doesn't mean they don't have native plants. So there really are a variety of native plants available at our local nurseries, but for whatever reason, there's a perception that there just isn't. And this could be that our local nurseries tend to be bad at labeling native plants as native plants, kind of like highlighting them out. That photo down on the left, this was one of the only native plant signs I saw when I was doing my project in 2018. that kind of specified like a specific area where these are the native plants or that anything was native. So that was kind of disappointing, that it wasn't something that nurseries really were highlighting, at least at that time. Perhaps it has, started to change since then. Also, just in general, a lot of the plants just weren't even labeled at all. Like, forget whether or not they were native, just what is this plant? So unless you knew by looking at the plant what it was, you had no idea. So that also makes it difficult to know what you're buying. Also, again, back at that time, very few nurseries also even indicated, what kind of benefits did a plant have to wildlife or pollinators. Again, I'm hoping that this is changing. 2018, now that you think about it, is kind of a while ago. So, hopefully the tides are turning, and nurseries are getting better at singling out, which plants are great for attracting hummingbirds, which are good for monarchs and whatnot. All right, so if the nurseries are kind of hit and miss, where else can you try to find native plants? So the fall plant sales are a great spot to try to find those. That is really why I wanted to do this presentation this month in October, because that is when the majority of our fall plant sales take place. This is a good place to try to find those species that you may just never be able to find at nurseries. Also, that part of the proceeds from the sale of that plant is going back to benefit the local organization that's hosting the plant sale. So I'm just going to briefly read through the list. Most of these happen every year. So that's good to keep in mind. If for some reason it's just too soon for you to get to one of these this year, you can keep it in mind for next year. So we've got the Boyce Thompson Arboretum, which is a little bit out of the way of the Phoenix metro area. But if you live in the East Valley, it's maybe not as far as a drive for you. They have a fall plant sale every year that goes on for several weeks. And then next, this is a first-time event. I'm not sure if this will happen in future years, but there is a Southwest Monarch Butterfly Festival happening tomorrow at Scottsdale Community College. And so in addition to just various activities related to monarchs, including learning how to tag monarchs as part of a community science project, they are having a milkweed sale, and also the Maricopa Native Seed Library will be there, which is providing some free wildflower seeds to attendees. Another sale that happens generally every year is Butterfly Wonderland's Fall Pollinator Plant Sale. I think they tout that one as the only local sale that is focused on pollinators. So that one might be worth checking out. Again, that's this weekend. Also, next weekend is the Desert Botanical Gardens Fall Plant Sale. This one also happens every year. Just keep in mind for this one, it is free to attend. However, you do need to have advanced reservations, kind of picking a specific time slot to enter. So if you're interested in that, do look at their website so that you don't miss out. Another one that tends to happen every year is the Maricopa County Master Gardener Fall Festival and Plant Sale. It doesn't necessarily have a focus on native plants, but there could be, and it's just a great organization to help support. And in addition, the Master Gardeners will be there to help answer questions that you might have about planting or gardening. So that's also one to perhaps check out. That one's happening next weekend. Later on this month, the Center for Native and Urban Wildlife, which is located at Scottsdale Community College, will be having their annual fall plant sale. That one is one that's definitely a good one to kind of find some unique species. They generally tend to grow a few that they know like are kind of hard to find species. They also have a lot of just cacti and succulents in general, even those that aren't native. So if you're interested in cacti and succulents, I highly recommend that one. And then lastly, as far as I know, this is the first time this is being offered. But Borderlands Nursery and Seed, I had mentioned them earlier in our meeting. They're located down in Patagonia, Arizona, so nowhere near us. But they're a great Arizona organization that grows native plants and does restoration. They're offering what they're calling a Chandler plant pickup. So you can order your plants online, and then at one dedicated day and time, November 18th, between 10:30 and 11:30, instead of having to drive all the way down to Patagonia, you can go to Chandler, And I think it's at Chandler Nature Center, and pick up your plants there. So that will be worth looking into. All right. So you try looking at some of those fall plant sales, trying to find some specific plants you're looking for. If you're still having difficulty finding a particular plant, our kind of last ditch effort would be to head down to Tucson, because Tucson is a place where you can find some native plant specialty nurseries. And so I've got those listed here. One of them is Spadefoot Nursery. Another is Desert Survivors Nursery. And then the last one is Tohono Chul Botanical Garden, which does have a retail nursery on site. They also are having a plant sale happening this weekend. So as you can see, many plant sales happening right now. So hopefully you've got some time either this weekend or sometime later this month to at least check one of them. All right. So maybe you still can't find a particular plant and you're just curious why. So some of the reasons why you might have, there just might not be a particular plant for sale at nurseries or plant sales is maybe it's just the wrong time of year. Perhaps the autumn and spring inventory is different. Maybe that plant is only available by special order. They can have it, they don't generally keep it in stock. Perhaps that plant, because the retail nurseries, a lot of them get their plants from wholesale suppliers. Perhaps the wholesalers are not growing that plant, and thus our local retail nurseries don't have access to them. It might be that the plant itself is just maybe too difficult to propagate, or is just too costly. It's not a cost-effective plant for them to try to sell. Some plants have just a low availability of seed, or maybe are only available as seeds and not as a potted plant. So it could be either or. Also, unfortunately, there are some plants that just maybe people in general or the nursery trade just doesn't feel are attractive, and they might not decide to grow those for sale. And then lastly, it could be that perhaps they just feel there's not a demand by customers. So we do say, definitely let nurseries know what plants you are looking for, especially those native plants. So hopefully the more that people ask, the more that nurseries will carry them, or at least try to carry them. All right. And then you would also be wondering, are native plants affordable? Perhaps you're thinking they might be more expensive than buying, just those general plants that every nursery seems to carry. That was something else I looked at in my research project. And I will say that in general, the prices of native plants were comparable to non-native plants. And in general, the prices were reasonable. And some were even what I call very cheap. Depending on where you go, you can perhaps find plants as low as $3. That Scottsdale Community College plant sale that I mentioned, they are one that definitely has some plants for very cheap. They're small plants, but still very cheap. And in some nurseries, plants were, perhaps $5.99. So, not too much of an investment to try to maybe slowly start adding new plants to your landscape. All right, so before I move on to kind of my top picks based on my own experience, I see we have a few questions or comments in the chat, so I'm going to take a look at those to start addressing those before we get too far. Okay, so one comment or question is, I always peruse the nurseries for hybrids and cultivars, which often have little pollen, nectar, or scent. Most of the time, this is what is mostly, I think you meant stocked, because they are eye candy and sell quickly, but are bad for our pollinators. Yes, definitely, Mary. So if you're not familiar with what a cultivar is, it's basically, it's a plant that exists, but it's kind of a cultivated version of that, maybe to make the flowers last longer, or the flowers be bigger, or different color flowers. And by doing that, it sometimes can take away some of those natural benefits of the plant, kind of as this comment alluded to. Maybe they don't have as much nectar or pollen or scent. So they're really not as beneficial, or in some cases not beneficial at all anymore to the wildlife. So if that is what you're trying to do with your landscaping, I recommend staying away from cultivars or hybrids. If you're wondering how you know a plant's a cultivar, when you look at the name of the plant, like on the tag, if it's got something in parentheses or in quotes, like Queen Anne version or something, like that's most likely a cultivar version of a. Next, someone asked, will the slides be available or are they listed? Right now they're not on our website, but I can definitely make a PDF out of them and send them out to you so that they'll be helpful. I'll try to incorporate some links in them too. Right now I don't have any links in my slides giving this live, but I think that would make it more useful. So yes, I will definitely somehow get them posted or sent out to those of you who attended today. And then we also have a lot of this information on our website chapter webpage as well. So that's a resource, aznps.com/chapter/Phoenix. All right. Question. I'm curious how many members are in the Phoenix chapter. Are there flyers for membership we can share? Okay, so that's more of a general question. I'll get to that one at the end. Remind me, Linda, to get to that. And then a comment that Tohono Chul has an amazing selection of plants and cactus and perennials that you highly recommend it. Yes, we actually had another member at our last meeting highly recommend the Tohono Chul plant sale as well. So again, that is in Tucson. There are plant sales happening this weekend. So if you can work that in, it might be a really good one to check out. All right. Okay. And then someone was asking about just my knowledge in general, and can I give a short bio? Sure, that sounds good. Also, this might be a good spot for that, since I'm gonna from this point forward kind of be speaking about my own experience of incorporating plants in my landscape. So I am originally from Ohio, so from the Midwest, not from this area, but I have now lived in the Phoenix area for over 15 years because I love the desert. And just over time, after living here, I enjoyed hiking and spending time outdoors, but I didn't really, consider myself, necessarily to be an environmentalist per se. But about, a few years after living here, I realized that, if I enjoy spending time, in our, desert preserves and whatnot, I should really be doing something to help protect them or give back to them. So that's when I started getting involved in volunteering with some local organizations. And then a few years after that, I learned about the Native Plant Society when I, was seeing these beautiful plants while I'm out hiking and said, hey, I want to have those in my yard instead of these plants that were there when I moved in. And so that's what kind of got me on this journey. I went back to school to kind of change careers to focus on environmental conservation and stewardship. So I received a master's degree in conservation biology in 2019 and have been moving forward ever since. I do now kind of work in that sector. I've worked as a natural resource specialist and now as a water resources specialist with the Department of the Interior. So yeah, that is a little bit about me. And you'll learn a little bit more as I continue with these slides and you see some of the photos of the plants that I have added to my yard. All right, thanks everyone for the comments and the questions. All right, and then one last comment, thank you, Marquita, is that the Tohono Chul, yes, they have their plant sale this weekend, but their retail nursery is also open all year round. So you're not just limited to checking them out this weekend. Thank you, that's great. Great for everyone to know. All right, so this part of the presentation from here forward, I'm kind of calling my Sonoran Desert plant palette for the Metro Phoenix area. So again, this is based on my experience, what I've kind of incorporated in my yard that I feel is a good representation of our native plants and ones that seem to do well in kind of suburban landscapes. That's where I live. So these plants are, number one, native to the Phoenix metro area. Number two, beneficial to wildlife. Number three, this is very important nowadays, are low water use. Number four, are relatively easy to care for. Number five, are generally available either at local retail nurseries, plant sales, and or seed suppliers. Again, I don't want to send you on a wild goose chase trying to find a plant that you're just not going to find. These are plants that you most likely will be able to find out there. And then lastly, when you use these plants in combination, they'll provide a variety of shapes, sizes, and colors for your landscape. So they'll be very attractive and very pretty. Okay, so more about me. This is my house and my yard and kind of how it has evolved over the years as I've kind of progressed on that journey that I just told you about. So I did fortunately have, some native plants in my yard to start with, and a few non-native cacti as well. So I did have two giant saguaros in my yard, a barrel cactus, and but not much else going on in the front yard. And in the backyard it was mostly non-native plants, kind of like those plants that you could find maybe at Home Depot or Lowe's. So over time I started incorporating more native plants into my landscaping. Also, we're started adopting more wildlife friendly landscaping habits, such as not using herbicides. I will say that has had like the biggest, most drastic impact on my yard. I feel it in making it wildlife friendly, as well as trying not to use insecticides. By not using herbicides, I noticed that some plants just started growing on their own, such as brittle bush and sweet bush, which I'll highlight a little later what those plants are specifically. So just that practice alone, stopping to use herbicides, and unfortunately, that means you have to hand pull the weeds in your yard. But when you start to differentiate what's really a weed and what's maybe not a weed, you start to see that some interesting things start growing in your yard. So this is my yard over time and kind of in different seasons. All right. So some more of my tips to kind of have natural landscaping is to use a variety of plant types and species. And this is for a few different reasons. It will help you have year-round blooms, meaning between all those different plants, there's always going to be something or several things blooming at some point during the year, and hopefully that covers all of the year. You'll provide food, nectar, shelter, shade, and other resources for wildlife, and it will also benefit many different wildlife species. Another tip is to start thinking of your landscape as a wildlife habitat. That's really what I try to do. Let your plants grow into wild, natural shapes. So we don't want those shrubs that are, perfect circles or squares. Let the plants kind of have their natural form, like you would see out, if you were hiking or in the desert. Also, for certain, do not trim your plants when they are blooming. That we wait so long to have them bloom. Not only is it when they're like, they're prettiest, but that's also when they're providing a lot of support to, our pollinators with their nectar. So don't prune the blooms. Also, avoid using insecticides and herbicides, as I said. This is also something that you want to ask about when you're buying your plants. Unfortunately, some plants are treated with herbicides or perhaps insecticides at nurseries, or while they're being grown. So you want to try to avoid those plants. Also, as I said, some things will maybe just start growing naturally in your yard that are actually good plants, not just weeds. So consider allowing those volunteer plants to grow and figure out what they are. And if they are a good plant, let them stay. So this photo here, I had to include this. This is actually bees sleeping. I believe this plant they were sleeping on this time was a globe mallow, but usually I find them sleeping on my brittle bush, the dried out stems of brittle bush. So they're just grab on for the night. This usually happens around June, and I think they're California digger bees, and they'll just stay there all night, usually a bunch of them all lined up on a few stems, and then in the morning they fly away and go on, and maybe them or different ones will come back the next day. So just a really cool thing that you'll start to see when you start gardening for wildlife. All right, and so more about why it's good to have a variety of different types of flowering plants in your yard is that, different shapes and sizes and colors and smells are attractive or support different types of pollinators and wildlife. So we definitely want to incorporate as many different types as we can. All right, so now I'm going to highlight a few of the different species that are on the Arizona Native Plant Society Phoenix chapter's plant list. That's the one that's available on our chapter webpage. And these are also ones that are kind of my tried and true ones that I've had in my yard, with a caveat for one or two that I'll explain when I get to those. All right, so first is desert ironwood. This is a tree, although you could maybe prune it and keep it more of a large shrub size. It does have evergreen leaves. Generally, when it gets really hot and dry, it might lose its leaves, but in general, it's green. And when you're lucky enough to have blooms, which doesn't always happen every year, they've got these beautiful kind of lavender blooms that are loved by bees and. All right. So definitely you want to have at least one tree in your outdoor space if you've got the room for it. If you don't have room for it, definitely don't try fitting in a tree. It will probably just end up causing more problems than good. But if you have the space, for sure, at least one tree. All right. And then you'd also want to, since we're in Arizona, incorporate some cacti and succulents. Again, if you happen to have the space and the financial resources, to add a saguaro, I highly recommend that. Not only are they an icon of the Sonoran Desert, but they're also very beneficial to wildlife as providing nesting spaces. The blooms themselves are, super attractive to bees and other pollinators, also our state flower. And then once those blooms form fruits, those fruits are loved by birds. And then just a fun fact that a saguaro will not grow its first arm until somewhere between 60 to 100 years old. So they're very long-lived species. I'm sure most of you have heard that, especially over the past few years with our dry, hot summers, the saguaros are having a hard time surviving, especially in the more like urban and suburban areas. So, it is important for us to try to keep having this in our landscape. My advice would be perhaps, and this is totally just anecdotal, would be maybe to try growing what I call a baby saguaro, rather than buying one that's already kind of full grown and it has to be, relocated to your area. Number one, that's very expensive to do. But just my kind of guess is that perhaps those will have a harder time adjusting, since they are large and, kind of a shock to their system to be relocated. If you're starting with, more of a baby saguaro that was grown in a pot and you're adding that to your landscape, perhaps it'll have a better chance of getting rooted and doing well. Also provide what's called a nurse plant to provide some shade for it as it's growing up so that it has a better chance of surviving. All right, some other cacti and succulents. Ocotillo. So this is the one where I do have a caveat. I love ocotillo. I have tried adding it to my yard 2 or 3 times now, but I've been planting, a young ocotillo that I'm buying as a potted plant. And thus far I have not had success. I guess I can't 100% say the one I have right now is dead, but I'll leave it in the ground, see if it does happen to grow. But I have a feeling it's gone. But maybe this is one that it is better, because I definitely see plenty of people with healthy, great ocotillos in their yards. So maybe this is one that's better to buy as a large plant, that's already fully grown and plant it that way, which is a little bit more of a financial investment, but if it means it's going to survive, I guess it's worth it. And then the Engelmann's prickly pear, kind of another icon of our area. Come this time of year, it has these beautiful kind of fuchsia fruit on it, which you can, eat carefully. They've got a lot of, cactus needles in them, but, if they're prepared properly, you can consume those or make a syrup out of them. All right, and now moving on to large shrubs or small trees. Another favorite of mine is hopseed bush. This is a terrific alternative to oleander, which is not native to our area, but is sold by almost every nursery out there. And some people even consider maybe oleander as being an invasive plant here. But hopbush is native to our area, and it is evergreen, just like oleander is. So a great replacement for that. Another plant is wolfberry. This one has very tiny, delicate flowers. Depending on which species you get, the flowers could be purple or perhaps white. But those flowers are loved by bees and butterflies and hummingbirds. And if everything goes right, they'll become berries, and then those berries are loved by birds. And then some small and medium-sized shrubs is pink fairy duster, not to be confused with the red fairy duster. It is a relative. The pink one is native to our area. The red one, I believe, is more in Mexico rather than here. But in general, both are beneficial to wildlife. These are loved by hummingbirds, butterflies, and bees. And I can say that I've been waiting for this one that's right outside my office window at home to finally get big enough to have multiple blooms, which it is right now. And just yesterday, there were all sorts of tiny little butterflies just loving those blooms. So it's finally doing its job that I planted it for a few years ago. Also, tuberosa. This is another favorite of mine. It's loved by hummingbirds as well as small birds. I've seen verdins kind of just peck at the bottom of the flower, kind of to take a shortcut to getting to the nectar, or maybe they're trying to get at insects. I'm not sure, but it's very cute to watch. They also add a really nice pop of color to your yard. There's coral color, and there are also some that are more of a yellow-orange color. More small and medium-sized shrubs. One of my absolute favorite plants is desert lavender, and that's because its leaves have a very fragrant, just really nice smell to them. They also have really tiny purple blooms that are also loved by all sorts of different pollinators and hummingbirds. And then jojoba is a great kind of just hardy evergreen plant to have in your yard, just something that's always gonna look pretty nice. And it also is a kind of a beneficial plant where jojoba oil is produced from its waxy seed, and its leaves and nuts are eaten by many different kinds of animals. And I think this is the last of small medium shrubs. We've got sweet bush. This is one of those that I said, once I stopped using herbicides in my yard and started hand pulling my weeds and was being a little discerning in what I was pulling, this is one that started growing on its own in my yard. And so I've started to, let them grow and realize that they are just a terrific plants. They are loved by so many different kinds of pollinators. So it's just a great addition. And they also blooms at different times of the year. So it's a great one to have, just to help you have those kind of year-round blooms happening in your yard. And then desert globe mallow. This is a plant that you might find in different colors, perhaps because they're cultivars, not the native plant. But I will say this is one that maybe even in its cultivar form, it does seem to still have benefits to wildlife, because I've seen bees use the ones in my yard, whether it's an orange one or a white one or a pink one. So this might be one that is okay to include some cultivars in your landscaping. This plant is a larval host plant to many butterflies. That means different types of butterfly. The caterpillar stage of butterflies, need this plant to eat, to survive. Also, as this picture shows, is bees just love to sleep in mallow flowers, and that definitely includes globe mallow flowers. So if you have these in your landscaping, start to keep an eye on that as the evening rolls around, to see if you can find any little bees sleeping in the flowers. Oh, I guess I was wrong. I do have a few more small, medium shrubs. All right, so brittle bush. This is kind of, just a plant that you're definitely going to see when you're out there in the desert hiking. So, just a good one to have in your yard, just to really, have a good representation of our local plants. It's also a great nectar source for pollinators. This is one that it might start to look a little straggly or even dead if it's been dry or hot, like it has this summer. But don't assume the plant's dead. It just will drop its leaves, during a drought, but it's still alive, and it will most likely come back, as the, winter progresses into spring, or as rain starts to come. This is also that plant that I mentioned at the beginning that had the bees sleeping on the stem. So even when it's done flowering and you're heading into summer and the plant just kind of looks all dried out, resist the urge to trim it, keep those long stems, and that is where those bees like to line up and spend the night. And then we've got creosote bush, just another icon in the Sonoran Desert. This is the one that they say that the desert, rainstorm smell is what this plant smells like. It's also a plant that's important to our native. All right, moving on to perennials. So we've got Perry's penstemon. There's a lot of different penstemon species, but Perry's is the one that I've had the most success with in my yard. So it's got these cute bright pink blooms. And then fall tansy aster is a purple flower plant that I've had tons of success with, especially in my garden bed. So it's not, in the, normal desert soil. This one especially seems to love amended soil, like I said, in my garden beds, and it's a great pollinator plant. So these are great additions to add color. They're also ones that tend to reseed, so you'll get new plants, popping up, assuming we've got some, rains to help, promote sprouting. So once you incorporate one plant, you might in the future get many coming from that one. Some other perennials are desert marigold. This is a plant that will have multiple blooms and might bloom at different times during the year. And the plant itself could end up surviving for a few years. I had one in my yard that I think survived for 2, maybe even 3 years. And again, it's one that's just loved by different pollinators. And desert senna, that's one that's kind of more of a, in my opinion, more of like a summer monsoon species that might be blooming around this time of year. And it's an important nectar source for native bees, and it's also a larval host plant for sulfur butterflies. And another one of my favorites, very easy plants to establish from seed, at least in my experience, is Palmer's Indian Mallow. And it will grow very tall. So even through other plants, it will still stand out. And it's got these really soft, velvety, heart-shaped flowers. So even when it's not blooming, it's a pretty plant, but it does have these bright yellow gold blooms. And then the fruits, or what you're actually seeing in that other photo, are pretty attractive as well. So try growing this by seed, and I think you'll feel like I did, that it was worth the wait. Some spring annuals. I'm sure if you are from our local area, you're familiar with these plants. First is Mexican gold poppy, and the other is Cultura's lupine. So these are kind of some of those species that we all are waiting to see when springtime rolls around, that we just want to see covering our desert areas. So if you want to see them when you're out and about hiking, of course, you'd also love to see them in your own yard. So these are great to try to incorporate in your yard by seed. And then some ones to try for the summer, planting in the summer monsoon season, which will then bloom either in summer or fall, are Arizona poppy, not to be confused with the other poppy. This one isn't even a true poppy, but it's a great summer plant. And then common sunflower is native throughout America. So it includes our area, and this I just call kind of nature's bird feeder. Well, the flowers alone are beneficial to lots of different pollinators, but once that goes to seed, the birds just love it, and they'll peck at it, just like it's a bird feeder. So it's a great plant to have. Of course, we want to have milkweed. I mentioned this earlier. My personal pick for our local area is, I feel the best one to choose is desert or rush milkweed. So that's Asclepias subulata. As I said, this is a host plant for monarchs. It's also a host plant for queen butterflies. In addition, its blooms also make an excellent nectar plant for butterflies and other pollinators. And then I also included a few plants that most folks might call weeds. But not all weeds are equal. Some are actually our native plants that do have benefits. So the first, which you might have around right now, I do, is called Spiderling, and there's various species of this. I think we've got at least 3 that are local to our area. I've got one pictured here that's got these bright pink flowers. The other ones I think have more white flowers, but they're very, very tiny flowers. This is quite zoomed in. But these flowers are loved by bees. And then this plant is also on the kind of recommended plant list for folks who have captive desert tortoises. So this is part of their diet. So a great plant to have. This is not a plant that you're most likely going to be able to find seeds for. This is one of those that if you stop using herbicides and start discerning the weeds that you're pulling, this is one that hopefully will start coming up on its own in your yard, and you'll know to leave this one alone and let it stay. And then fiddleneck is another one. This is a spring species. This is another one that, again, just started growing on its own in my yard, and you'll see this, in the desert if you go out in the spring. It's got very tiny, small gold flowers. I will say the reason this one is considered by some to be a weed is that it is poisonous to livestock. So, there's different reasons why people call plants weeds. Regarding spiderling, I think folks call it a weed because it's got these very sticky seeds. So every time I go out to my garden where I've got spiderling, when I come back in, I've got little seeds stuck to my socks and my shoes. So for that reason, folks may consider it a nuisance. So, give and take. I feel like the spiderling, it's one of the only things that came up this year because we had, basically no rain here. So I'm letting it stay because I know it is something that is providing benefits to the bees. And then a few last weeds are actually some grasses, because it's important to have some native grasses in your landscape. So again, these are ones that came up in my yard on their own. Just by not using herbicides. I have tried planting a few different kinds of native grasses like that I bought as potted plants, and unfortunately I have not had success with them. So I'm wary to recommend personally any particular kind because I haven't personally had success yet, but these are ones that are native plants that have come up on their own in my yard. So both of them are grama species, so 6 weeks grama and needle grama. And the reasons why we do want to incorporate native grass in our landscape is that they assist with soil stabilization and erosion control. And then the grasses themselves provide food and nesting material for wildlife. So again, if you can start to discern what those weeds are that are growing in your yard, you can hopefully figure out which ones are worth leaving alone and letting them stay. All right, so that's the last of the species. So just a few last pointers. So again, I've been on this journey for a few years in adding more plants to my yard and just enjoying it now for the most part, though I'm still got some plants I'm trying to add. So personally, I feel like I'm the manager of my own wildlife refuge right outside my door. I've gotten to really better understand and get to know the local wildlife we have here by looking at, what's growing in my yard on its own. What are the birds and the butterflies and the insects that I'm finding on my plant? Like, for example, that top picture here is like a caterpillar, I believe, on my sweet bush. And then we've got another bee. I'm not sure if that one's sleeping or just foraging for pollen or nectar in my Indian Mow. And then, I'm just become very observant of what's happening in my yard. I like to take photos, as you can see. And so fortunately, that's not just for fun. That can also, be for a purpose. And so I'm a very big proponent of citizen science and community science. So some projects that you can get involved in, if you so choose, are iNaturalist, eBird, Nature's Notebook, Desert Refuge, the Saguaro Census, and you can learn more about those as well as some other recommended projects if you look at our chapter webpage. I will say personally, iNaturalist has really been the way that I have gotten to know what are these things that are growing in my yard. Is it a weed? Is it not a weed? Should I let it stay by posting photos? seeing what it gets ID'd as, and then learning more about that plant, and then figuring out, okay, is this something I think I should let stay? That has been the best way for me to kind of manage my wildlife refuge well. And then you can also consider certifying your habitat. There's different ways to go about this. Some are free, some have a nominal charge. Some, if you want like a metal sign for your yard, you have to, obviously pay a fee for that. But one local program that the Native Plant Society helped, was on kind of a committee that helped create the criteria for it, is offered by the Maricopa Native Seed Library, and it's called the Maricopa Pollinator Pathway. So you can look into that. Again, it's free to just, certify your yard and get on a map. If you want a sign, you can look into that. I believe you have to pay. I know last year they were giving away a few signs for free, but I'm not sure if that is still happening. A few other certifying programs are the Desert Rivers Audubon, a local Audubon chapter does have a bird habitat program. Monarch Watch, you can certify your yard as a monarch way station if it meets the criteria. The National Wildlife Federation or Arizona Wildlife Federation has a certified wildlife habitat program, and the North American Butterfly Association also has a certified butterfly garden program. All right, so then last, we're at the end here. So now what? You've just heard a lot of information, learned about a lot of resources. Hopefully you'll take some next steps by planting something. Like I said, this is the perfect time to plant here in our area. If you're from another part of the country, that might seem totally counterintuitive to you, but for us, I think we're just coming out of a very hot, dry summer. We're approaching this time of year where hopefully we're going to get rain. The temperatures are definitely going to be cooler. Now is when to plant, to give those plants as much time as possible to get established, get those roots in the ground, get used to their new location before we hit next year's hot, dry summer again. So again, plant now. Create a wish list of the plants and the seeds that you want to get, using what I mentioned today, using the Phoenix chapter's plant list, or using the Native Plant Society's plant list, or look at some of the other resources that are on our local plant list and see, what sounds like the best species to you. Visit one of those fall plant sales, or maybe 2 or 3. Ask your friends and family if they have any extra seeds or cuttings. Maybe you don't even have to go out and buy anything, or you only have to buy a few things and you can get some other things for free. You can attend a planting workshop. For example, again, our partner, the Maricopa Native Seed Library, they're hosting an in-person pollinator planting workshop on Thursday, October 19th at South Mountain Community Library. That's in Phoenix. And information about that is on our webpage. If you look at the Native Plant Society's events list, it's listed in our calendar of events. Also, like I said, if you're using insecticides and herbicides in your landscape, please stop. It will do so much to help support the wildlife, and also it could help bring new plants to your yard without you having to invest anything. And then lastly, you consider certifying your wildlife habitat. The reason to do so is that, if you do have that sign in your yard, it will help raise awareness to passersby. What is going on here? What is this? Maybe this is something I want to do. So just helping to bring awareness to others. So if you do have questions, you can reach out to me, Lisa Rivera, at the Native Plant Society Phoenix Chapter's website, azmpsphoenix@gmail.com. All right, I am going to stop sharing, but I do see we've got some comments and questions in the chat, so we'll move on to those. And I am also going to stop the recording.